$23,911. That was the median law school grant last year, and 20.5% of students got nothing at all and paid the sticker price on the website. The offer letter sitting in your inbox is a first offer. It is negotiable. Your law school knows it, the law school across town knows it, and the only person in the transaction who usually doesn't know it is the 22-year-old reading the word congratulations, including the version of that letter that comes with strings attached. 1 in 4 students holding a conditional scholarship last year had it reduced or taken away entirely, sometimes worth $90,000 or more over the course of the 3 years. Now, again, like I said, 20.5% of law students pay full sticker. That's from the school's own ABA filings. 1 in 5 pays the number on the website. Now, some of those people had no leverage, but most of them had some and didn't use it. So the full price student is subsidizing the discounted student sitting 2 seats over in the same class, taking the same notes, getting the same degree. Nothing about their education is different. The only difference was the paperwork several months back. And the full price student is rarely the person you would guess. It's usually somebody who got into a school slightly above their numbers, felt grateful, and used that gratitude as a reason not to even ask. Now, being admitted below school's median is exactly the situation where asking matters most, because that's the file the school is least worried about losing and most willing to negotiate over once a competing offer shows up. Now, take a scholarship like the Dean's Recognition Award or the Founders Scholarship. It's real money, a nice line for your parents, but it's not much more than a semester of parking and books. So that is a marketing instrument, nothing more. It makes you feel chosen, and that's what stops you from asking for more. Treat it like a compliment, but don't use that as a reason not to negotiate. You also want to check whether that kind of scholarship is renewable, because some of these small named awards are only for 1 year, which means the number in your letter is a third of what you mentally multiplied it by when you read it. Now, whatever they opened with is typically not their last number. They don't spend their full budget in round 1 because they can't. They need money for the waitlist in March, money for the applicant who calls with a competing offer in April, money for summer melt when students get off of other schools' waitlists and leave them behind. I have never seen a cycle where the first wave of letters was the last money that moved, which means there is a gap between what you were offered and what you can get. That is a line item in somebody's spreadsheet with your name available to go next to it. Now, the median grant is $23,911. Half of aided students got less than that. Across all ABA schools in the 2025 filings, about 80% of full-time students received an institutional grant, and the median award, again, $23,911 for the year. So if you're holding $12,000 at a school charging north of $60,000, you're being told you're below the middle of their aided class. That data is the starting point for a conversation, because now you know what generous actually means. It means something in real dollars, not just superlatives or adjectives. Now, whether you sit against the school's 25th or 50th or 70th percentile LSAT, that is the single strongest predictor of what they're going to pay you. It's not your essay or who recommended you, not the alumni event. The mechanism is actually pretty simple. Schools report medians of both their LSAT and GPA. The medians get compared, and a student above the 75th protects the number while a student below the 25th costs them. Money flows to whoever protects the number, and everything else in your file decides whether you get in. Your score decides what you pay. Now, early offers are made with a full budget. April offers are made with a nearly full class and a shrinking budget. Waitlist money in July is whatever is left after everyone else's deposits cleared. And so a reconsideration request sent in February lands differently than the identical email sent in May. If you're going to ask, you want to ask while they still have both money and uncertainty. That has a limited shelf life. Once it's gone, your negotiation leverage is gone. Now, seat deposit deadlines are typically in the spring. The weeks right before the deadline are the highest pressure moment on the school side, because that's when they find out whether the class they built and intended to get is the class they're actually gonna get. After the deposits land, their uncertainty drops and you lose your negotiation leverage. So you want to ask before the deadline, not after it, and never on the deadline itself, because you want the human being there to have time to bring it to a committee. Now, you can also send a reconsideration request. That's the polite term for a scholarship negotiation request. You might say something like, I love your school and would appreciate any additional consideration, but that does nothing because it doesn't give them any concrete number, no comparison, no real reason to budge. What works is when you name the school you're comparing, you name the dollar amount of the competing offer, you state simply, straightforwardly, you would prefer to attend their school, and you ask whether they can close the gap. Just a simple page, single page, nothing more. You're not pleading, you're not begging, you are not being rude, you are doing the thing their process was built to receive. You also want to send that email specifically to the financial aid office and copy your contact in admissions because those are two very different budgets, two different people, and the one who likes you might not be the one holding the money. And give them a number you'd say yes to. Don't say any additional consideration, don't leave it vague, don't make them guess. Keep it specific. That makes it a simple yes or no, and you can act on it quickly when you hear back. Now, having leverage means you've got a real written offer from a school they consider a peer. That is it. That is the whole currency. That is your leverage. They will generally engage with a school in their own band or above, but they will ignore schools 40 spots below because that was never their fear. They're not afraid to lose you to a school that ranked that much below, which means your negotiating position is actually set months earlier when you decided which schools to apply to. If you only apply to reaches, you get in, but you have no leverage. If you apply to a smart band with some safeties, some targets, and reaches, you've got everything. Now, about 36% of full-time students receive an award of at least half tuition. When a school tells you half tuition is an unusually strong offer, they're describing something that happens to more than a third of their class. Now, the median grant has climbed about 93% since the 2012-2013 cycle, roughly 15 years ago, which is still over 40% after inflation. So know that discounting is the business model now. It's built in, it is expected. If you're paying sticker, you are the exception. Now, a conditional scholarship is one that requires you to maintain a minimum GPA or class rank. Schools legally have to disclose them. It's part of their ABA licensing, and they've got to publish retention data showing how many students had an award reduced or eliminated. Now, you want to do the analysis before you sign. If an award requires a 3.0 GPA and a mandatory first-year curve puts a meaningful share of the class under a 3.0, the school knows in August approximately how many awards it's taking back in May. I talked to a student last cycle who had a $30,000 conditional award, finished the first year 4 spots outside the cutoff, and then paid sticker for 2L and 3L. Because they never asked about the curve, you've got to ask about the curve. So before you deposit, you want to ask, if you have one of these conditional scholarships, which I hope you don't, what is the mandatory first year curve? What percent of students on this award kept it last year? And if I lose it, can I earn it back in 2L? Now, the retention data is already published. You're not asking them to reveal anything sensitive. You're asking them to say it concretely in writing, which changes how carefully they write. Now, tuition is just one line, but the cost of attendance is tuition plus fees, plus the school's own estimate of living expenses, which can run close to $30,000 a year, even outside of expensive cities. So a full tuition award still leaves 3 years of rent, food, health insurance, a bar prep course. That's money people actually borrow now, and it could come back to bite you if you did the math only based on tuition. Now, before you compare two offers, pull each school's published cost of attendance, subtract the award, and then look at the remainder. If you get a $45,000 award in a city where the school estimates $30,000 a year in living expenses, that could leave you borrowing more than $30,000 somewhere cheaper. Sticker price rankings and net price rankings are frequently in a different order, and the only one you overpay is the net price. Now, federal Unsubsidized loans accrue interest from disbursement, meaning that you start paying interest on them the second you receive the money. So in other words, you're paying interest on 1L money throughout 2L and 3L, and it compounds. That's why a $50,000 award and a $50,000 loan are not equal and opposite. The award is worth its face value, but the loan costs more than the face value, and the difference compounds for years while your only income is a summer job. Now, Grad Plus loans are eliminated for new borrowers. Law students are capped at $50,000 a year and $200,000 total in federal loans, with a limited grandfather window for people already borrowing. And so at a school where all-in cost of attendance runs north of 6 figures a year, federal loans no longer cover the degree. The rest comes from private credit priced on your credit score and often needing a cosigner. Schools know this. Aid offices are actively rewriting how they award because the student who can't finance the gap doesn't enroll no matter how much they love this school. Now, just under 7% of full-time students receive an award at or above full tuition. It's a small group, but it's overwhelmingly a group with high LSAT scores. Nobody talks their way into that number. You don't negotiate your way to a full ride. It goes to files that fix a school's median problem. And schools decide fast, typically early in this cycle, which is another reason why you want to apply early with your best score rather than late with a score that you're apologizing for. Now, the cheapest move you can make is getting a score that puts you at the very top of a school ranked 15 spots below your reach. That could be worth more in cash than getting into the reach. Same 3 years, same bar exam, and a difference of 6 figures in what you owe when you sit for it. That trade isn't right for everybody, and it depends heavily on the city you want to practice in, but you should actively consider that possibility. Then there are some schools that go past tuition and add a living stipend or a guaranteed summer grant on top of full tuition. Those do exist, they're rare, and they're clearly a transaction. It's a school buying a number that it needs, and they're paying above list price to do it. And once you see it that way, this whole thing gets a lot less emotional because you're not begging, you've got an asset they'd like to have in their filings, which explains something that confuses applicants every spring. A school will sometimes hand a huge award to a student it admitted late, while a student who got in November with similar numbers got less. That's not a school playing favorites. They came in a little short of a target, and they're devoting money quickly to fix that gap. Now, a few points on that 120 to 180 LSAT scale will often move an applicant from below a school's 25th to above their 75th. Now, I sell LSAT prep, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but this math is coming straight from the school's own grant tables. You can read them right now on the ABA required disclosures website. If you've got an offer and it's not the number that you wanted, you've got a couple of options available to you. You can negotiate the one that you've got with the letter I described earlier, or alternatively, you can retake the LSAT, get a higher score, and then leverage that higher score for scholarship reconsideration. If you want my help getting that LSAT score up, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference PDF on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Putting that link in the chat for you. Now, the LSAT contains 76 scored questions, roughly. That's the whole current LSAT, 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comp section, and an extra unscored section that doesn't count for everything. Now, at 162, you can miss about 18 questions out of the 76 and still get that 162. To get a 170, you're down to about 8 or 9. At a 175, you can get roughly 4 questions wrong. The exact conversion shifts a question or two depending on which test you sat for, but the overall shape of it never really changes. So the gap between a 162 and a 175 is roughly 14 questions. And that number is the reason everything you did to get into the 160s stops working, and why most people who get a 165 plateau for months. Below a 165, your misses come in clusters. You could name them out loud. Like, I don't really get necessary assumptions, or parallel reasoning eats up all my time, or I fall apart on the third reading comp passage. These are real and they're categorical. You learn the question type, you drill it, your gap shrinks, your score jumps up. That's most of how you get from 150 to 165, and it feels great because the cause and effect is right there in front of you. But then in the high 160s, things change, because you've got maybe 12 misses across the entire test, spread across the 2 logical reasonings and the reading comp. You could divide them up by question type. You get 2 flaw questions, 2 necessary assumption, 2 inference, a parallel, a couple of reading comps. There's no pattern or cluster in there. There's no particular weak areas. It all just looks like noise. And that's where everybody makes the same mistake. They see a couple of flaw questions they got wrong. They decide flaw is the issue, and they spend a week grinding flaw questions. Then they drop inference, they start drilling inference, and their score doesn't really change. They decide they've hit their ceiling. But what the issue really is here is that your diagnostic tool stopped working. The analytics stopped being meaningful. Now, I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and plateauing in the high 160s is one of the most common things I see. Now, what got you here is not going to get you there. What got you to the high 160s will not get you into the 170s. Below 165, the fix is pretty simple. You just find the weakest question type and you drill it. But above 165, there's no one particular question type. You're not getting questions wrong because of the type. You're getting them wrong because they're hard. So I want you to stop drilling by question type if you're at this level. Start by getting down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why. Because the misses at this point are scattered. So look at your last practice test, look at what you got wrong, and ask a different question about them. Don't ask what type they were, ask how many times you read the stimulus, the argument. If you only read it once, that might be the issue. The thing that decided whether you got it right or wrong happened 20 seconds before you ever reached the choices. It was a reading failure back in the stimulus. For example, you read a stimulus that says most researchers in the field, and you read that as researchers. You saw the phrase would likely reduce and filed it as reduces. Then you did flawless logic on a stimulus you misread and picked a wrong answer and felt good about it. The solution here is not sexy, it's not glamorous. You've got to slow down on your reading of the stimulus, and that will allow you to speed up reading the choices. And most people at this level do the opposite. They read the stimulus fast, then spend 40 seconds agonizing over 2 choices. I want you to take 5-10 seconds from the choices read and devote those back to the stimulus, move it back up to the front. Then your agonizing over the choices will disappear because it was never about the choices in the first place. Now, let's say that you're doing questions in order, you're pretty good through the first 15 or 18, and then you fall off a cliff after that. Most of the misses might be in the back third. If 7 of the 9 are in the back third, your issue is not accuracy, it's order of operations. Now, logical reasoning is presented in a general order of difficulty, meaning the questions get harder as the section goes on, but it's not uniform. There could be a couple of easier questions towards the end and a couple of harder ones earlier in the section. And if you're missing easy questions later, it's maybe because you got bogged down on question number 17. So the fix here is, if you're 30 seconds or a minute past your normal pacing on a particular question, you've got to cut your losses, flag them, skip them, come back to them later, no exceptions. Don't say to yourself, I'm so close, because you're not close. Nobody ever feels stuck, even if they are stuck. What you want to do is you want to cut your losses, flag it, skip it, come back to it later. Having a second read could help you break out of your tunnel vision, and with a fresh perspective, on a second look, you could get it right a lot more easily. Now, let's say you're down to 2 choices and you get it wrong more than half the time. What you want to do is flag those, then later count how often you picked right when you were down to 2. If you're at 50% or below on those, you want to look at what you're doing when you're down to 2. Let's see, you're down to A and D. So you read A, you read D, you read A again, you read D again. You pick the one that feels better. You're comparing the choices to each other. What you should have done rather than comparing them to each other, is check them back to the stimulus. Then, upon analysis later after the fact, find the one word in the wrong answer that makes it wrong. One single word could be a quantifier, could be a verb tense, it could be a word that turned a some into an all. If upon your analysis you can't point at a specific word and say why it makes that answer wrong, you haven't gotten down to the root cause yet. At LSAT Unplugged, we use a framework called the Socratic review method. It's a cornerstone of my courses and my coaching programs. The idea being, we want to help you figure out what makes the wrong answer choice tempting, what ultimately makes it wrong, what makes the right answer unappealing, and what ultimately makes it correct. Because if you can get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, then you won't make the same mistake again, because the LSAT repeats itself. We want to help you figure out how to nip it in the bud so that you don't keep making those same mistakes. Now, let's say you're facing a big gap between timed and untimed work. Say, for example, untimed you're at a 175, but timed you're at a 166. A lot of times in these cases, people will blame nerves. And sometimes it is nerves. But in other cases, it could be because your practice test scores are inflated in a way that could be very difficult to see inside a study session. Because during practice, you take little pauses. You might look up for a couple seconds. You might reread a sentence. You get up for a snack or get up for a drink of water or go to the bathroom. And all of those are free resets your brain is not going to get on test day. On actual test day, it's strictly timed. You're in person at a testing center. You can't just get up whenever you want. That would invalidate your exam. So take your practice tests under realistic timed conditions, just like it's going to be on test day, so you'll actually know whether your issue is timing or accuracy. We typically have our students taking one timed practice test a week, in some cases 2 timed tests a week, along with detailed review, but those actual timed sittings give us a real gauge on where you're actually at and lets you better work on your endurance. So what I want you to do, go back to the math. If you're at a 155, you're missing 25 questions a test. That's 25 data points each week, and you can find real patterns in those. At a 170, you're only missing 8 questions. You can't find a pattern in 8 things. So you need a bigger denominator. And the only place to get one is your uncertainty. Because it's not just the questions that you get wrong. It's also the ones that you get right, but you were guessing on and got lucky, but it could have gone the other way. And so every time you take a section, every question you want to flag, if you were uncertain, maybe you narrowed it to 2, maybe you guessed, then when you're reviewing, you don't just look at what you got wrong. You look at the ones that you got right, but you were narrowed down to 2. Those are the ones that could have easily gone the other way. So you want to analyze the guesses, the half rights, the maybes, plus the ones you got wrong. If you add in all the uncertain ones, you've got a lot more data to look at. And you want to look at why you weren't certain. Typically, it was a phrase in the stimulus that didn't fully click, or the right answer was written in a way that you hadn't seen before, and you burned time trying to figure it out and decode it. Not necessarily a reasoning error, and it wouldn't appear in a typical error log, and that's the reason that people plateau, even if they feel like they're tracking their results. And I want you to be honest about this. It could feel embarrassing when you realize that you understand less than you thought, but the idea here is we want you to get the questions wrong now, untimed, on your own studying, when it doesn't matter, so you can learn from your mistakes and get them right on test day when it actually counts. Now, if you want my help engaging in this kind of analysis, that's exactly what we do at LSAT Unplugged. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference PDF on everything logical reasoning and reading comp. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.